My guest is a stand-up comedian from New York. He has a comedy special on YouTube titled Life Begins and is a co-host of the Here's the Scenario podcast. I'm excited to welcome Mike Cannon.
What's up, buddy?
Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Squeeze man in between dad duties.
Yeah, literally. I was changing shit right before this. So
hope you wash your hands.
Duties. Yeah. Nah. It's what wet wipes are for, It's the same thing.
Well, by the way, did you watch that Bruce Jenner documentary yet?
No, there is one. Is that the proper title?
I am not sure, but when I saw it, I got a little giddy to ask you about it. It's like all of Bruce's success told by Caitlyn. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was kind of wondering, how that campaign was going to run. Did we talk about that in Spokane? Because it's like it's supposed to be the death of that person, right? Like the death of Bruce and the birth of Caitlyn and all that stuff. But it does seem kind of like you have to acknowledge the accomplishments of the great man Bruce Jenner even sell Caitlyn to the public.
Dude, it's so weird though, because as she's telling it, I know this is a fucking weird thing to start with, but we always fucking DM about sports documentaries and shit. And she's telling the story as she's getting her makeup done for the Vanity Fair shoot. It's just you don't know that until the very end. It's very weird. But
the initial Vanity Fair one?
I think so.
Oh,
that was a while ago too.
That was a long time. So all these people, and by all these people, I mean just famous people in general, they have these crews and they've established the narrative even before they've fully fleshed out their own gender.
Yeah.
It's insane that she's 6 weeks into being a woman and she knows exactly how and when she's going to drop this documentary.
Jesus, dude, it's crazy.
It's sociopathic. And purely because she's famous, not because she's trans.
God, fucking nuts. Well, we're starting strong. Just to give some backstory, we worked together in Spokane maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think maybe even less. I don't know. It's honestly, it's blurring.
Yeah, dude, it's been with the Delta and everything is starting to get weird again. But yeah,
dude. Well, I mean, Spokane also, I didn't, all I know about Washington is Twilight and then Seattle. It's I don't know anything else. So Spokane was 110 degrees with overcast smoke billowing through the city and homeless people running 60 miles per hour dead at you asking for $5.
Dude, so much meth too. I crawled over 3 people fucking just getting to the club from the hotel.
Yeah.
It was nuts. Yeah. But awesome shows though. Those crowds were sick that weekend.
Killer. Yeah.
Yeah. But we were talking and I found out you have a weird kind of tie to Mike DeStefano. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm not in New York, so I don't know really his legacy, but I wanted to talk about what your rise in New York has been coming up in New York, and then how Mike and stuff. So how long have you been doing comedy for?
13 years, since 2008.
Shit.
Yeah, I mean, I did a handful of open mics in college, but that I don't count that as starting comedy because I was basically blackout drunk on stage with a bunch of my doofy friends rooting me on as I'm talking about piss for 3 minutes. And that was only a handful of times. Then once I graduated and kind of got my footing in terms of where I was living and stuff, then I started in 2008 and was handing out flyers immediately in Times Square during the frigid winter. It was brutal.
Do you ever wish that you had started somewhere else?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time, dude, because there's a lot of people still, and even people that I'm friends with that have that reference point for me as a comedian. They know when I was truly bad, and I've been lucky enough to get decently good at it, or at least how I feel about my own skill set. But I know that I was almost unserviceably bad in the beginning. So it's been a crazy leap from that perspective. And I thought it only lived inside my own heart, but apparently other people have witnessed it and carried it with them over the years as well.
Yeah, that's That is one of the benefits of like switching scenes. Cause I've heard people say like you're an open micer like in the city that you starred forever.
Right. Yeah.
That just sucks. But
I mean, it's kind of how it feels now. Now, I mean, now it doesn't because it just like shit changes gradually. Like it's funny that you even say like, what's the legacy of Mike DiStefano? And it's like, I don't know. Like I hold his legacy dear, and I know other comedians hold his legacy dear, but I don't think anybody coming up knows who the hell he is at all. Which is like crazy.
I follow comedy pretty closely, but the owners of the club I work at, they were talking about him coming in and like he's in recovery or he was in recovery and I started going down the rabbit hole and I was like, Jesus Christ, this dude was a monster. But
yeah,
before we jump to that, like what for you when you were coming up, like what was because 13 years in, you're like, you got past of the cellar and shit. Like how much were you grinding out? Like, did you have any kind of balance in your life or was it just all you were doing?
For a while, I mean, I've always had balance in the sense that I've been dating my wife since I started. Like, I've never been single in comedy, which is probably for the best. But she like that was my balance, but also she knew that like this is what I wanted more than anything. So there wasn't really a social to comedy balance. She was just cool as shit and weathered the storm of a psychopath that was grinding 6-7 nights a week for, I mean, until now, I'm still doing that. And we don't, we're living outside of the city, but I'm still driving into the city 6-7 nights a week to perform. So there's a balance in the sense that I know there's a balance in the sense that I'm with my son every day. I'm a really good dad. I'm a good husband. She's really busy though too. So we're in this weird pattern where we're both kind of grinding and building and things are happening at the same time for both of our businesses. And it's great that we've known each other for as long as we have, because I think with that foundation, we're able to support each other through it instead of getting like mad and chipping at each other and, all that shit that kind of comes with relationships and pursuing really anything hardcore.
Yeah. Of the people that I know, you got a lot of shit going on and like you have a fucking great attitude about it. Like there's a lot of people I know that if they were doing like 2 of the 10 things you're doing, they'd be stressed to the balls. And like, is it just edibles that's getting you through it or like what?
I think it's edibles and but it's also like I just like making shit, dude. All of the stuff that I'm doing is self-generated. Mm-hmm. So I've had my moments where I've had industry success, where I was on MTV and things like that. And that was really early. And then that stuff kind of went away. And for a long time, I did let myself get stressed and get embittered a little bit about certain things. But then I realized that I was just waiting on somebody else's approval or somebody else to give me a green light to work. And that's the most insane thing you could do when you're in a business that is so self-centered.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like nobody cares about me. I have to do it.
They do. Well, I was talking to somebody about this morning because I mean, a lot of us get fucking wrapped up in our head and shit. And like, one thing I did pick up with you is like you give a shit about other comics and like the community aspect and stuff. And there are a lot of people that are like, they have that. They're self-centered and it's like, why isn't this shit happening for me yet? But they're not doing anything to help other people too. And it's right. That's like the most toxic fucking attitude that you can have. It's so, and I know a few people from New York and like have interacted with them. And it seems like a New York thing where you guys do give I mean, if you're one of the comics that's in the circle, like you really care about each other.
Yeah. I think I don't know what it's like now in terms of like some of the younger comedians, like because the community feels so fractured and I'm sure it is everywhere, but there's like ideological sides that everybody's taking right now, and if you don't align with one of them, then you're cast out by both, and that's just something I choose not to participate in. I'm just gonna be a comedian. So the people that I've learned from are like Bobby Kelly, who's one of the strongest comics on the planet and also one of the most genuine good dudes who looks out for people and really is like spent his entire career giving a boost to people that I wouldn't say don't deserve it, but certainly haven't like he's helped me way more than I thought, than I can rationalize. Like, why would you help me? But it's like he has that type of heart. And it's like, I don't know. I see what some successful people get like, which is, very, very insulated and trying to protect their audience and keep it near and dear to them and not give access to anybody else. And I think that's like a weird mental illness.
Dude, it's such a scarcity mindset too. Like, I don't understand it at all, because it's not like there's not a limited amount of audience.
No.
Like there's so much in terms of entertainment and people that are looking to be entertained, and to be like, oh, this is mine. And I just don't understand it at all.
No, it's also a proven unsuccessful model, because like, look at all the LA guys, especially back when like Rogan was out in LA, right? All of them shared in the wealth and platform of Rogan. He put people on. They were then putting other people on. These podcasts are where you go to promote things instead of like the Tonight Show now. Like, you go out to LA and do fucking Tiger Belly or whatever, all those shows. And it's like those guys and ladies and women are legitimately helping each other out and letting their audiences feed off of each other. And it's like that type of thing really creates like a comedy boom as opposed to a person boom.
Oh, for sure. And when you were coming up, like, what was it like for you around, like, because you said Bobby helped you out quite a bit, but like, what was your development like? That was was New York that type of community where it was people helping each other? Was it just cutthroat?
It's pretty cutthroat. I mean, I don't know. You have your friends and you definitely help your friends, obviously, and like give your friends advice, but all that stuff, I was always like super nervous and intimidated by a lot of the bigger comedians. So I kept to myself, which in the long run actually did me a bunch of favors, because I wasn't the young guy just saying shit, around older comedians to like try to prove my worth and be like, I have stuff going on too, which is maybe the most annoying quality any comedian can have. But so I think like me keeping to myself and observing and then watching these beasts in clubs, that just kicked in my internal competitive edge, where I come from an athletic background. So all this shit to me is kind of similar, where it's like, hey man, I'm not trying to beat these people, but I am trying to get that good. And I do see what it takes and like what the work that goes into it, and the comfort and the don't give a fuck and the general attitude. And it's like, that's the stuff that I was almost absorbing through osmosis, as opposed to like demanding advice from people and trying to open for people. It's like, I never really opened for anybody. I opened for Chris DiStefano for like 3 months, and then I never really featured again. So I forced myself to be a headliner. Like, I just say you have to. That's how I saw Bobby do it. That's how I've seen a bunch of comedians make that leap. It's like, nope, I'm a headliner. I don't do that anymore. I'm playing these rooms and I'm trying to build this time, and I'm going to put out some shit. And you just have to decide, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sort of struggling with what that path looks like too, because I don't, dude, you see people develop in different ways, and I really think like learning from good comics is the best way to do it. And then if you're in like club circuits and stuff, you see some of these people come through and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like the best Dave Landau has told me some fucking hilarious stories about the road, just like, because he developed on the road, and shit that you just sort of come across, there's no checks and balances. Like, there's nobody in the back of the room telling you like, hey man, don't do that shit, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, don't do that. And it leads to like some pretty god awful comedy. But
right. Well, that's why the conversation about comedy workplace safety is so hysterical, because it's like, no, you mean in terms of like the office where you have your writer's job. You don't mean on the road at a VFW in bumfuck Massachusetts. It's like there is no HR. Some lady just pulled her vagina out and was like, bah! Like sucking down a cool cigarette with her lips. And it's like, yeah, dude, who am I going to go to?
It's fucking ridiculous. And if you go complain to the booker too, like,
then you won't work.
Yeah. It's just, and is that right? No, but like it's the business. It's just fucking. It sort of is what it is.
Well, because this shouldn't be a business. It's like it's a pirate ship. It's ridiculous. The comedy, the reason why like all these things are now entering comedy is because comedy has gotten too popular. It used to be for people with a sense of humor, but now with social media, it's expanded and everybody realizes that everybody thinks they have a sense of humor, but about 11% of human beings on earth have a sense of humor.
It's
like
true.
That's it. You know what I mean? And now it's so big that these unfunny morons are chiming in on what it should be. And it's like, no, you don't even understand that you don't have the right to comment on this because you're not funny. And that just like, that blows everybody's mind.
I can't imagine the fights you've gotten with on your comment section on the video that you just posted. The video you just posted, that lady, the clam lady, is fucking hilarious. Like anybody listening or watching has to watch this shit because it was super funny. But that like, I want to get back to your development stuff a little bit. Like how long into you developing were you in the clubs? Because Taylor Clark, my buddy, he's been on here a couple of times. He said you guys ran like a show out of a hostel somewhere, and
dude,
said it was like super grassroots. Like, what you went from open mics to like running your own stuff to clubs, or how did that work?
So I didn't do as many open mics early because instead of that, I was scared of them. I think like the cliquish nature of open mics back then was really like brutal. And then you had guys that were really funny, like Mike Lawrence, the really funny comic, writer, successful writer, very like empathetic and kind person now, was a true monster in the beginning of his comedy career and would terrorize open mics. He'd just get up after me or some other hack and trash us, trash the room, tell us that we're never going to make $1, like all this stuff. So that shit would and then sit with the popular kids and the best comedians in that open mic. So it's like, it's kind of hilarious that shit kind of pushed me out of open mics, weirdly enough, especially coming from like, I was an athlete in high school type of background. You consider those people jock bullies. And it's like, that's not what I was at all. I went to those and I was like timid and scared, wanting to make friends. And it was a kind of a toxic environment. So instead, I went to Broadway Comedy Club and I passed out flyers. I answered the phones. I sat people. I hid out in that club for like 2.5 years, which was both good and bad because it got me a lot of stage time at a proper club in front of tourists and like, other people. And I got to fail with little pressure, but I also didn't necessarily get to meet the full swath of comedians that could have gotten me into a variety of rooms that may have sharpened my skills a bit earlier. But I was also drinking a shitload at the time too. So I was funny, but I wasn't sharpening the tool as quickly. And I think it's because I was probably like, sucking down so much booze.
What was the day job too? Like, weren't you at like some kind of marketing agency and shit?
Yeah, initially I was my first job was an office manager at a marketing company, like digital marketing, which actually was kind of beneficial because I got to learn how they set up ad campaigns for certain creative things. Like they did Lil Wayne's The Carter 3, they did movies, all that stuff. So I didn't learn anything directly, but it did implant that digital marketing is the thing, that's like, there is a way to kind of successfully build a grassroots campaign for something that nobody has ever heard of through just, you got to throw money at it, obviously. But it was still soul sucking because I was the CEO's, personal assistant, which is a thankless position that is just, you're just constantly being like told you're an idiot. And then after that, I got an office manager / IT job, which I don't have any computer background whatsoever. I lied during the interview. I thought it was just for an office manager job. And they were like, so you're a Mac specialist? And I was like, all my life. like just instantly lied sociopathically. They never put me to the test. And I just had that job for 5 years. While I was doing comedy, I was networking the entire company. I was setting up servers. I was doing desktop support at everybody's station. I literally had never opened a Mac computer in my life until that job. And then I just Googled my way through 5 years of employment.
That's fucking amazing.
That is white privilege.
Yeah. That's so funny. So what was the were you still drinking at that time?
Oh yeah. I mean, there is no, I think actually working in a marketing company might be worse for alcoholism than doing comedy. Because dude, they're like 3 p.m. on a Friday, sometimes on a Tuesday. There's like whiskey tastings. They're constantly trying to prove how cool they are and hospitable towards their employees, that they make it so the place, you don't want to leave. So you're just shit-faced from 3 p.m. on almost every single day. And I was in charge of buying the booze. So every time I would buy the booze for the office, I'd like peel off an 18 rack for myself.
That's so
and
great.
Bring it home. Yeah.
So funny. So what was your split though? Like, was it 9 to 5 and then you were out doing?
Yeah. I mean, it was like 10 to 6. So for a while, dude, especially in the beginning, I was doing 10 to 6 open mic, bar show if I could, bar show / hanging out at comedy clubs, trying to show face, whatever. And then after that, I would do prom shows, which started at 1 a.m. and would go until 3:30 a.m. Then I'd drive back to Queens, get back at around 4:30. Me and my boy Ricky Velez from King of Staten Island, he's been on a ton of stuff. We would smoke weed in my apartment at 4:30 a.m. until 5:30 when we kind of came down from the evening. And then I woke up at 8 a.m. and started the entire thing over. So I was like on Adderall every day just to motor through, surviving on 2.5 hours of sleep.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, prom shows obviously were seasonal, but like that was the type of shit in New York. It's like, you know, you want to get good and you want to be a part of this thing. And you want to like, my goal when I started stand up wasn't, you know, it obviously I'd love to be famous in the sense that I'd like to draw people to come to my shows, but fame on a broad scale was never my goal. I wanted to be great. Like I want to be really good, you know? So that I just thought that that's the way you do it. You immerse yourself in this thing and you do it relentlessly until eventually you kind of have some breakthrough moments.
And what was that for you? Like how long dude, that does not seem sustainable. Like that must have been fucking brutal.
My first, like, because TV and stuff like that is fine, you know, but I got TV really early in the sense that I think I got my first TV in 2013. So I was like 3 or 4 years into or 2012, I may have taped. So I was like 4 years into comedy or whatever. And then I started getting all this shit. And I was like, here I go, baby. This is the guy code model of things. I don't know if you were around for that, but like the guy code, girl code phenomenon in New York was kind of an eye-opening experience for a lot of the aged comedians, because out of nowhere, boom, all these young kids kind of leveled up to being able to like sell theater. Like Carly Aquilino was selling theaters 2 years into comedy. And kudos to her. She's grinded it out and become a really good comedian, you know, during and since then. But like being thrown into that position, like, why would you even try after that? You're like, yeah, I'm just like, they're here for me. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah,
but she had her head on straight.
You got to really actually love comedy too. I mean, because I heard about somebody down in Tacoma this week, Nick Coletta, I think his name is. I don't know him, but like he fucking blew up on like Vine or whatever, and he's got this massive audience, and I think he's only been doing comedy for like 2 years. I can't imagine fucking doing like 45 and like having I mean, how long into it did you make that decision to like, okay, I'm doing these rooms and I'm headlining?
I think that was like 7 years. So I think 7 or 8 years, where I did my album at nine in my first album. And that was probably like a year into headlining. So I would say 8 years. And I did that because I was doing podcasts, and my podcast was doing kind of well. And I was on Opie and Jim at first, then Jim Norton and Sam Roberts, and all these different shows that were giving me a little bit of a bump in profile. And people were like, dude, you're really funny on podcasts. Like, what do you do? And so I realized nobody had any reference to what I actually do and what I want to do, which is stand up. And so I took 9 years of jokes and a year of headlining, which is definitely too soon, but a year of headlining, and I made my first hour that, you know, I'm still happy with it.
Was it?
But that was it.
Gorilla that produced it.
Yeah. And I did it at New York Comedy Club. Nice.
Did you work with Mike Merrifield? Is he on that?
I feel like I know. Yeah, he may have come on later. I don't know, but I know Damien, Ryan Bitzer, like those guys were the initial day one OGs, because I think I was one of the first albums that they may have done, or like not first albums, I shouldn't say that, but like when they started really producing and really putting a lot of shit out, I was one of those first guys that kind of tipped it a little bit, because I was just ready, man. I was just like, all right, I'm not waiting for a half hour. I've submitted to Comedy Central. I haven't even done a 5-minute fucking set on that channel. They've never given me 30 minutes. They're not going to give me anything. So I might as well just create what I'm going to create and do it. And it turned out successfully. Like it debuted at #1. It was on Billboard charts. Like the clips themselves have generated millions of views on Instagram. And I was one of like, not the first, because Schultz was doing that obviously earlier to great success, but I saw that immediately and I was like, all right, I got to like start putting up my clips. Gone are the days where material is precious and everybody's like, oh, I have a 5-minute clip, but it's unlisted, so I don't want anybody to see it because I'm not trying to give it away. It's like at this point, it's like, no, I got to get this shit out there so people know what they can expect from me when they come to see me.
It's a weird balance point, like on what you're putting out there too. Cause I struggle, like if it's like topical shit or it's shit that's like crowd work or like funny, like the video that you put out, that's great. If I'm working on something and I'm like putting a lot of like sweat and heart into it, I'm not just fucking putting that out. Like that's something you want to keep. You don't know when it's done. So if it's kind of decent but a throwaway, it's a weird balance point. But
well, that's why I have somebody like following me now basically to sets in the city where I'm getting everything filmed. I was lucky enough to film that interaction. So just to explain it for people that are listening, it's like I was at New York Comedy Club. It was kind of a slow night. There was probably about 20 people in the audience, but they were great. They were having a really good time. But this one lady in the front row and her friend, but more this one lady, was just interrupting. Every time I'd start a setup, she'd interrupt and just make a comment or ask a question. And it got to the point where it was so infuriating. I growled at her, which was insane. But I also thought I handled her with kitty gloves. Like there have been moments with hecklers where I'm like, shut the fuck up, you cunt. And like, you know, snapped because probably years of resentment towards hecklers built up into this one moment and they either earned it or didn't. But I just flew off the handle. And for whatever reason, with this one lady, I stayed in the pocket and just didn't even curse at her, wasn't threatening at all, was just constantly kind of reminding her of how inappropriate and unwanted her interruptions and participation were. And she just didn't understand, thought I was being completely sensitive, like was operating on a different reality than everybody else. And then afterwards, that night, she got escorted out of the room after my set. And after that night, she found my Facebook fan page, which takes a lot of digging because I couldn't give a shit about that. You know, it's all Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. It's like the Facebook is almost strictly for the Midwest. And then she found it, wrote a negative review saying she didn't, you know, recommend me as a comedian, which whatever. I responded to that. She deleted that review. And then a week later, apparently I was still living in her brain. She wrote a 2-page diatribe recounting in detail the entire evening and then basically left out anything that could be misconstrued or that could be interpreted as shitty behavior from her, and was solely focusing on me. But even while trying to insult me, she was saying I was killing.
The review is fucking great, dude. So the guy that like is filming your stuff, he spliced it all together and put it
So I
That's
did
what
that
he's doing.
actually.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah, I did that stuff. But I mean, he sent me. So that guy, I'm actually no longer working with because he got hired by a big movie studio. So
Oh shit.
I think he just got hit by a train in my heart. You know,
Yeah.
that's how I view it. So it doesn't hurt me too much. But now that last night I have a new videographer that's coming around, and she's fucking incredible. She edits all of my Mike Takes Edibles videos. She's really creative, and we captured a lot of good stuff last night. But it's almost like somebody, the way she described me also was that I was being like sexually threatening. Like she was like, he was talking about my clam being or my vagina being a clam, and I was scared and all this stuff. And it's like that could ruin somebody's life. That type of talk, you know what I mean?
Sure.
If somebody's only going by that review, then people are like, what is this guy? Like, is he really aggressive towards women? Like, what is this shit? So it's like, I'm grateful that I started bringing people around to film my shit because it's like, nah, bitch, here are the receipts for how terrible you were throughout this entire set. And not only that, but like the reason I edited it, like, and cut it to each interruption was because I was trying to do bits. I was trying to do the new bits that I have yet to release. So I'm not just putting the full setup so people can see the bit and also see the bit being ruined. So it's like it just ruins it on several different levels. But it's like this is how the process goes, is we're trying to grind this out and figure out what works and get to it. And it's just often ruined by somebody who is so entitled to the show being 100% about them.
When you growled, dude, it was one of the funniest fucking things I've ever seen. Because it's not the actual growl, it's the realizing what you just did and being in the moment. Like the shit that happens with crowd work is so fucking funny because you're like, it sometimes it just comes out like that perfect, like natural reaction. And it's the funniest shit. Like
it's like you could tell when you're present, right? Like you could tell, and it's not like a stock, like I don't come to your job and knock the dick out of your mouth and blah, blah, blah. It's like that stuff is great and audiences love it and whatever. But there's something about an authentic moment where it's almost involuntarily coming out of you because it's such a visceral reaction to somebody's behavior.
It's like if improv was real, you know, like actually good, you know.
It's not canned bits.
Exactly. It's fucking good. Crowd work is the shit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Mike a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know, or for people listening, can you explain who he was and how you knew him?
Yeah, so Mike DiStefano was an incredible New York City based comedian who had like a wild life leading up to him even starting comedy. I think he started comedy when he was like 36. So he started really late because most of his youth was spent doing heroin and contracting HIV and like going through a life that like you see in movie. I mean, it's like Train Spotting, dude. His life was fucking intense. And you know, a lot of like familial disappointment and dark shit. But what made him so great is that in his comedy, he spoke candidly about all this stuff with such a Bronx, New York, don't give a fuck. There's nothing you can do to knock me off my path because I've looked the devil in the eyes, you know? So it's like, there's nothing anybody can say that will embarrass me, that makes me feel insecure about my vision. It was like, it's just when I see people like that are able to do that and are so confident in their own perspective, that really like that speaks to me because I find it to be the opposite of what I have. Like I'm very conscious of what other people think, and I'm trying my best to develop don't give a fuck, but that stuff that it doesn't come as naturally to me as somebody like Mike, who was just sit on the you know, there's few people that can sit on stage. I typically hate when people sit on stage unless they're an all-time great. But Mike was one of those guys where he could sit and still be a power act. You know what I mean? Like one of those guys who could still deliver on his heels and just slam the crowd, slam them over the head with a mallet. And you're just like, you just love it, man. He was captivating. And the way that I knew him was he was cousins with my wife. So I had met him before I even really started to do stand-up, and I knew of him but well before I started to do stand-up. So he just he takes took family very seriously, and he didn't have to extend himself at all, but he did. And he gave me his number, and he asked me to meet him out at the Cellar and meet him out at different places for a coffee, and would talk comedy with me relentlessly, and just, kind of
How annoying were you at that point too? Like, to give people some context to that, like for somebody of his status to sit down with some, like being where you were at that point.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think, yeah, but I think I've always been good at, like, as I cut you off, I'm about to say this. I've always been good at listening. but like, I was always a little like, know my place type shit. Like, I would meet him out and then kind of like sit there and listen and not assume that I really knew anything, because I knew I didn't. You know what I mean? Of course I had my like opinions, and I'd mouth off to my buddies who were on the similar level. But whenever I got around like bigger comedians to me, I had and have such a reverence for these guys and women that, like, it I don't know. I just always feel like an open micer. Like, even with Bobby Kelly, who I'm now like legitimately friends with. He's my bud. Like, I love Bobby. We're pals. We talk. It's kind of surreal that we do, because I grew up watching him on like Tough Crowd, listening to him on the O&A, and the fact that I'm like really cool with him, Norton, Voss, those three are like, we text and talk and all of that stuff, and I do their shows. It's so surreal. And I'm finally kind of comfortable enough to be myself and be comedically confident around them. But if they like gave me a look, I'd shut down right to open micer real quick.
It's just such a strange dynamic. Like, I think it's almost like sports, like you said, where, you're a rookie, and then you come in and you, like, hopefully a vet takes you under their wing and teaches you some shit, but like you're never done like learning. And it's right. Also like some of those guys too, it's like, who are they learning from at this point? Like,
I mean, they actually, Bobby would say he's learning from us and younger generations, and not comedically necessarily, but like how to build a following, how to build a career, like all these different elements. It's like Bobby has all of his tools. He's fully formed as a comedian. Obviously everybody can get better, and there's different elements that you could add to your act, but in terms of like just overall killing, you can't kill harder than Bobby kills. So the stuff that he's picking up is mostly from younger generations that understand the digital world and know how to like accrue a massive following. And so that he's in touch with it. That's why he has young comics on his show. And he wants to learn. He's hungry for that. He's hungry for everything, but he's hungry for that information. I'd take a shot at him. He's definitely not going to hear this. So it's just a piece of shit thing for me to do.
So what was Mike like though? If Bobby was that way, it seemed, you told me a little bit about his habits and like what he meant to the community in New York. What was he like as a stand-up, like in the community?
Well, it's funny, man, because it's like, it's one of those things where you find out like you have a special relationship with somebody, right? And you assume, you're like, well, that was our relationship. That is awesome that he extended himself to me. And I feel so special that he welcomed me into his life in that way and like took time to give me advice. And after he died, all these people that I knew and were friends with, when we never really talked about our connection to him, it opened up this world where he was talking to hundreds of comedians, a lot of them in recovery, that he'd have phone calls with on a daily basis, different comedians that he was like legitimately helping out through the hell world of drugs. And it's like, that to me is so huge, dude, because I know comedy can kind of disassociate people from being a human being, but it's really important to me to be a human being and to be like a good dude that people can rely on and look to, and like, and I'll be there for them and help out my friends and all that shit. That type of example set for me is what like, okay, you can do that and be good. You don't have to be a piece of shit, vapid, shallow person that doesn't give a fuck about anybody to maintain success or gain success, I should say.
I heard a story about him just leading up to this because I
Mm.
was talking to the club owners and they loved him and shit. And like, I guess he did a show in Kirkland and fucking brought like 50 people from meetings to the show and like took care of them all and stuff. And then
Yeah.
another thing was he like I leading up to this, is it Franny's Last Ride?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Like
moth.
he did these moth storytelling shows that are fucking incredible. Like they're if you want to get a good cry in, it's like
Dude,
it's
every
unbelievable.
every year, at least once a year, sometimes more, if I am feeling emotionally vulnerable and I know I have to douche my body of sadness or something, I put that on and it's instant waterworks, which then is broken up with laughs and you can't believe what you're watching.
Dude,
It's like it's the full gamut of emotion. It's crazy.
it's it's unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy. But I heard this story about when he was on Last Comic Standing, like he went to LA and I think he was like in the same hotel as Roy Wood Jr. And like that whole day, Roy spent trying to figure out what shirt he was going to wear on the show. And he
Uh-huh.
asked Mike, what'd you do today? Mike's like, I fucking got a Harley. I rented it and drove up and down the coast. Like, he's like, you haven't been prepping for Last Comic Day? He's like, no, I don't know the next time I'm gonna be able to come out here. Like, he just did not, like, he didn't waste anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's something about that, dude. That's why, like, I really appreciate the fact that I can travel and even do stand up. Like, it's insane. I remember I got to perform for the troops, right? Right before my son. Actually, I came inside of my wife, then left for the Middle East, came home and found out she was pregnant. So my child was literally burrowing into an egg while I was doing this. But I remember being on like a rooftop in Kuwait, looking out and being like, I can't fucking believe that jokes got me here. I can't believe it. I told
It's
jokes
insane, man.
and now I'm in Kuwait. You know what I mean? It doesn't get lost on me. And actually that helped me. I don't know. You played hoops, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so it like, you ever hear when the adults used to tell us, they're like, use basketball as a tool, use it as a tool. It can get you places, not necessarily basketball related. It could get you places. And I always was like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, I don't even get that. Like, yeah, it's going to get me to more basketball. Like, I'm going to be in the NBA. Like, what are you even talking about? And then the fact that like I got to tell jokes and look out into a Kuwaiti desert and see the sunset and realize that jokes got me to this part of the world. I was like, that's what they meant when they said use basketball as a tool. Use these things to be able to travel the world to gain life experience. It's not all about the act of what you're doing. It's about like what it opens your life to possibly be. Like it's a bit hokey and shit, but dude, I was in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, like 8 bases. I was meeting all these different Americans, people, these children that signed up to be fucking warriors over there, which is insane. And like just the perspective that kind of offers you, it's given me a more well-rounded life, and that's because of comedy. And that's something to appreciate from something Mike, that rent the Harley. That's the exact same mindset.
In the Dude, what you're touching on too, I think is really important is like the money, the financial aspect of this business is so shitty. And to not be able to like recognize like that being a win is, I mean, how many people that are like, successful financially with this thing would go to that situation? I mean, they wouldn't even go because it wouldn't pay. But then also like to have that perspective, like, holy shit, this brought me here. It's not a like, what's the next thing that I have to do? And I read in Artie Lang's book, I think him and Attell went over for like one of the troop shows, and it was like 12 guys that were in a group that they were performing for, and they had just come back from a mission and 6 didn't come back. And like these guys, like Artie and Dave, were like, you don't want us to fucking perform still, right? Like you just lost 6 of your best friends, and they're like, no, they hadn't slept for like 2 days. Like, we want to watch a comedy show. Like, that's fucking comedy. If you can make 6 dudes, and they were rolling, like they got tons of laughs and they had a blast doing it and shit. But like, that is some real ass shit and stuff that just changes your perspective on it. Like, it's fucking wild.
It's so weird that I spend most of my life seeking out compliments, and then as soon as I get them, I'm uncomfortable, you know. But like that, you get letters like that or messages sometimes of people that are like, hey, you helped me through this time, like listening to podcasts, whatever, watching your special, seeing stand up. Like, I was out, you know, I caught your show. I wasn't gonna go to the comedy club, but then I caught the show, and this, and this, like what you were talking about in your struggle really fucking resonated with me. And it kind of turned around my week. And you're like, you know, sometimes you can brush it off because you're in a low place, or it's sandwiched between 2 DMs calling you a faggot. It's like, you know, and it could just be it could be a little watered down. But then when you kind of revisit it in your head, and you understand the actual currency of life, you know, financially, it's fine. Like, there's ways to make money. You can make it work. But that stuff is kind of more or less what you're going for, or at least I am, where I want to be. I'm trying to fill something in here. You know what I mean? There are some emotional deficits and other soul deficits that I'm facing that I'm trying my best to like pack shut or fill or hold, you know, whatever. And it's like, the money doesn't do that. That stuff, reaching people and relating to people and being able to recognize that we're not just individuals. It's kind of it's a nice thing, man. That's the real shit.
It's just so weird, like that. Like, I have the same feeling, but just like when you meet some of these like grislier people, like just fucking like harder dudes too. Like, I can't imagine like some of the guys at the cellar that you're dealing with that are that exact same. It's because it's kind of like feminine, you know, like,
of course, yeah.
Like, it's just emotion. That's not the right word, but just you're like, it's not this like,
it's emotional.
Yeah, it's emotional.
It's
it's like, at the end of the day, we're just very emotional people.
You really, I mean, you know, look at somebody like Artie, who is hilarious. If you met him, you'd probably like, if you met him and didn't know him, you'd probably be a little scared because he's huge. His voice, like, his just general Jersey demeanor. You know, oh my God, those involuntary that just came out of me. But you know, he's like an intimidating guy, and then you get to know him, and he's the softest, kindest, emotionally in touch, probably too much type of dude that like, he's a fucking open wound, man. And it's like, that guy, if you saw him on the street, you would never be like, he's an artist. But he's a fucking artist.
It's crazy. And I mean, it's like musicians too, you know, like they're just like, Artie seems to be like walking around on like one leg and fucking like, I don't know what his situation is right now, but it's just, I think he would probably admit that it's been a struggle, like, the whole way. But what's great too is somebody can be like that and they recognize that it's a fucking struggle and like they call it out.
I think the awareness is like kind of, that's what separates even different comedians. Is there's other comedians that have figured out the math and they can deliver a joke and they're really funny because they're just smart. You know what I mean? Certain people can figure out funny, but then the real, like, the people that I relate to are like kind of the authentic, had to be funny to defend their own life type of way. Like, those are the people that I really like. I just connect with that shit, you know?
For sure. So is it weird, like, couple questions just about your career and stuff, like, you're in at the cellar, you've done like a lot of what there is to do in New York. Like, what are your career goals, and then what's it like for you balancing like being a dad with being a stand-up?
It's I mean, my career goals are like, I see how people are self-generating their income, and you know, and being able to create for themselves and not have to live in a certain city to get jobs or auditions or whatever it may be. It's like, so I love living in New York. I don't know if I'll ever outgrow this city. It just seems like there's always something going on and something to do. And comedically, I started stand up to be a stand up. I didn't start stand up to be in movies.
Mhm.
I would love to be in movies. That'd be cool. I would do it, but I did stand up because stand up is what it is for me. So like, if I can self-generate all my content where I'm doing, I do that poker interview series that I did with Bobby Kelly, where it's a heads up thing, and that's super fun. And I was able to shoot that on my own. If I waited for my agent who tried to like give creative notes on the idea, and I was like, shut your face. You are the most uncreative person I've ever met in my life. You're just trying to like be a bad boyfriend and neg me into not doing it so it doesn't give you more work. It's like, if I listened to any of these morons, I'd be sitting on my thumb waiting for them to produce jobs that would never come. So if I can continue to just create what I want to create and what I find funny and accumulate an audience of like-minded people, it's building and building, and if I can continue to do that, then what's better than that? Like, what am I gonna be, a teacher, or like, working in an IT job or anything like that? Not burning those jobs. Just for me personally, like, I couldn't survive that way.
You're pretty good at one of them, though.
yeah. I mean, I did last for 5 years, but after 5 years, I was starting to get like all the MTV shit, and I just never came to work. And they like sat me down. They're like, we need we're like super supportive, but we need somebody that's gonna be here.
Yeah.
I was like, fair enough.
Part.
Yeah, like, fair enough. I guess I don't have health insurance anymore.
So how does like having a kid though play into that? Because you're friends with a lot of people that are like arguably like lifelong bachelors and fucking like stand-ups in general, not really the best with commitment and things like that. Or where are you at with that? And like, are you finding good balance?
Yeah, I think like, because that's part of the life shit that I've come to grow to appreciate. Is it's like, jokes got me here looking out into Kuwait. I see me feeding my son, and I'm like, jokes got me here. Jokes are what got me able to care for my son and feed my son. Like, I can't believe some fucking dipshit, right when my wife got pregnant, right? It was one of her family members, comes up to me when we're announcing it to the family, and she's like, wow, you're having a baby. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, how are you gonna feed this thing? Or how are you gonna support this kid? And I looked at her and I go, with jokes. Isn't that great? And she like, and it's like, no, fuck you, because you tried to make me feel less than, or try to make some weird chip joke at me about how, like, something that you know nothing about. It's like, I'll show you my fucking my tax returns if you'd like to really know what I'm bringing in. But it's like that type of shit. I'm just trying to, like, the traditional way of being a family and earning a living. And I had a dad who was a stockbroker, and I had the stay-at-home mom, and I watched that crumble. I watched that break down and fucking die in front of me in a really intense way. So I know that that's not a safety net. That way of life doesn't guarantee anything. I would much rather be happy and show my son what it's like to attack your dream while also being a full service, loving family member. It's like, if I'm so present and so there and so engaged in my son's life that he's like, whether he appreciates it or not, eventually, it doesn't matter. He'll never be able to say otherwise. So that's the balance is like, I'm around and I love it. That's it.
What's great too is that lady, what she's doing there is she's like, she's trying to reaffirm to herself that her not following her dreams is the right thing to do. And it's bullshit, man. Like, it's so scary to like take that leap of faith and pursue what you actually want to do. And then you're just met with the most fucking toxicity. And there are a couple people, like, back to Taylor Clark, like, he's an awesome dad. Like, he fucking loves being a dad. And there are a few guys I know in comedy. My buddy just had a kid, and like, I just know, like, are they gonna be the guy that's like, hey, do your fucking homework and like just like you gotta work to get anything? No, but they're gonna be like that best friend that's always there and like present and fucking like they love their kids. And I just like I don't know why that narrative isn't accepted in society as much. Like it seems like one that we should probably all agree to, but
yeah. Well, that's what's funny,
ridiculous.
man. It's like people are like, so you're on the road? You're on the road all the time? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gone for 3 to 4 days. 4 days is a lot, but I'm like 3 days a week. How often was my dad around? Never, because he worked constantly and I was asleep by the time he got home. He worked Monday through Saturday doing Wall Street shit. So it's like all this you're never around shit. It's like, no, you're never around. I'm actually around way more. I'm around for the majority of the week during the day. It's like, all that
fucking stuff. You're happy with what you did and left too. Like you're not like bringing that home to where it's like, even when you're home, you're not home.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's another huge piece of it. Just the fucking corporate environment's brutal that way. Like it's, and I think a lot of people are starting to see that too with like the work from home stuff is like,
right.
A lot of it, like sitting in a car all the time probably isn't good for us. Like
right.
It might be worse to do that every day than for us to be in the same room all the time. Like it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just whatever's important to me, which I've gone through several phases in my life of what's important. I didn't think I would ever really be a dad. Like I knew I wanted to before comedy, and then I just didn't know because I was always worried because my dad was an actor, and then he kind of like I just filmed a documentary with him where we actually had it out about this particular incident, but he was like, I never blamed you guys for why I didn't succeed in acting, and I'm like you kind of did, dude. And he's like, I did not, and I was like, I don't think you have 100% perfect recall to the things that you've said. And I started listing certain fights that we've gotten into, and he's like, oh, he like didn't remember any of it. And it's like, it's fine, but don't pretend that never happened, and that like the idea is that you're trying to own all of these things. I'm going to make mistakes as a dad, and I'm gonna fuck up, but I also know that I'm going to apologize and be present and want to find out like how I fucked up and how I can make it better to my kid and how I can make it better to my wife, because it's also the balance of being a dad and being a husband. It's like stand up is great, but you still got to take your wife out. You still have to be a proper partner. You can't just like trade parenting duties, like 2 ships passing in the night or whatever. You have to be engaged if you want it to work. And it's like, I've known my wife since I was 10 years old. She's family even before we got married, just because of how long that we've known each other and been invested into each other's lives. It's like, if I can't care about her, then there is no prayer. Like I have no chance.
There's no point to this shit too.
Yeah.
I love what you said about that. Cause I just went to Alaska with my dad and like, I don't know. There have been ebbs and flows in his and my relationship, like any relationship or whatever. But I do think comedy has helped me like be able to just sort of look at things differently and fucking like have these conversations that before I wouldn't have been able to have. And like and you also, one thing I think recovery ties into this a little bit too, but like your dad was just a fucking dude. Like there's some of that too, where it's like you start getting older and you're like, fuck man, I don't know what I'm doing now. How the hell did he know? And he was just doing the best he could, but white privilege, but it's,
I mean, like but it does, like, I think so comedy opened me up to be able to have those conversations. Right. And then being a father opened me up to emotional, like openness, to being empathetic, like truly empathetic towards other people. I've grown when I first became a dad, people were like, so do you feel a little understanding of your father's behavior? And like, and I was like, no, actually I'm angrier. I was initially angrier because I was like, how the fuck, I love my son so much. how do you let it get to this point where we're at odds? We're not talking for 10 plus years.
Damn.
And it's like, and it's a real like contentious, often violent, like, you know, verbally abusive, emotionally manipulative, all that stuff. It's like, that got me really, really angry. And then through the process of only even 2 years of being a parent, it's softened me a little bit to just being like, hey man, whatever, like whatever that stuff is, our relationship as father son is kind of over now. Like, I'm the dad now. I have the responsibility of curating this boy's life and equipping him with the emotional maturity and awareness and ability to adapt to certain situations. It's like, this is on me. If I'm hanging out with the feelings that I had and the resentments that I had from my childhood, then I've learned nothing. And there's no point to me even being a father.
For sure.
You know, so it's like that type of 360 and openness after I've had, or 180, I should say, and have a kid and being able to kind of like see my dad's life, because he was abused. He had a really tough upbringing. And I always knew that, but being a dad and being like so in love with my son, it's made me feel a little bit more for my dad and his emotional shortcomings. It's obviously he's responsible for his own shit, but a lot of it, it's not really his fault. Like, some of the stuff, it's just not his fault that he wasn't equipped with the ability to have even this kind of conversation.
For sure.
You know,
I feel like I'm talking to my therapist right now.
I know. Am I being too serious? Is this a funny
no,
podcast?
You're good, man. I did ask you to bring a DeStefano story on. Are you still good for that, or did we?
Mike D?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to. So I had a funny. The first time.
Let me cue up the music, though. We got some good Storytime music. Hold on.
Beautiful.
It's story time. It's story time with Adam. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Adam and friends.
Hell yeah. That's
all right,
great.
Go for it.
It's kind of even a short one, but the first time that I saw him perform, I've saw him perform twice before I like really did comedy. Like, I was kind of in it and I was considering it, and I maybe had done even a handful of open mics, but I was one of those guys that didn't call myself a comedian right away. I thought I had to earn that title. It's all back to sports shit. You know, it's like, it's a ridiculous mindset, but it's how I attacked this entire thing. And I saw him headline a Monday night back in at Caroline's on Broadway. So it was an off night. And like Ryan Reese, who I work with now, Pete Corielli opened for him, and then Mike went up, and I couldn't believe it. Like, I just couldn't believe what he was saying, what he was like, the way he commanded the room. Again, like, I'll just keep going back to this, but there's some people with that like inherent, I don't give a fuck what you think. Like, I'm gonna say this whether or not you approve. That thing, I gravitate to that, like, you know, a moth to a light or whatever. Like, that just brings me in so much. And so I was in awe watching him. And then after the show, we're all hanging out in the lobby of Caroline's, waiting for him to like take pictures and say what's up. I'm with the whole family, right? My wife, his, you know, extended family, everybody, all the DeStefanos. And I turn around and there he is. And I'm like, oh my God. I run up to him before even the family. And I'm like, dude, that was so fucking good. I'm blown away. I love it. I can't believe it. And he's like, you like that, huh? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, just really impressed by the way that you approach comedy, and like the way you can bounce off of certain things, the way you don't let, you know, even dead space bother you. Like, I really went all out saying how much this meant to me. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. Thanks. And he walked away. And then 2 minutes later, Mike DeStefano walked out of the green room, and he was wearing something completely different. And I was like, what the fuck? And people started clapping and they hugged him. They were taking pictures. And I was looking around and I was like, what's going on? And then I looked to my right, and his brother, Joe, who looks exactly like him, wearing the outfit of the person that I just complimented was standing right next to me, smiling his ass off, being like,
That's so fucking funny.
"So you thought that was me, huh?"
That's great.
Yeah. I still have not lived that down because I still hang with Joe, his brother, every once in a while. He'll come to family parties and just like unload every joke that he's been thinking of for the last 6 months because he's hilarious too. But you know, he's more of a real, you know, blue collar street dude, and he's just hilarious. But that he'll never let me live that down for the rest of my life.
That's so fucking awesome. All right, a bonus question for you. If you had to say your favorite comic all time so far or as of now.
Damn.
It's a tough question.
It is tough because it ebbs and flows based on like what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Sure. I do think probably my favorite of all time is probably Chappelle. Like I've probably enjoyed more of his stuff than I've enjoyed of anybody, like, you know, and probably a close second, Carlin, because Carlin is like, he's what got me into comedy. He changed my brain, you know, he made me think the way that I do, and kind of like growing up as a repressed Irish Catholic kid, you kind of only have one perspective, and that's what you hang on to basically have control over your life. And you think anything outside of that is like deviant or whatever. George Carlin, having been an Irish Catholic kid himself and then expanding his own brain using psychedelics, which I've hopped on board with myself, but that changed me forever. Like it started getting me to think like that and consider the full perspective of things. So favorite would probably be Chappelle, but person who is like left an indelible life mark on me is Carlin.
Well, solid. I right now for me, I think it's probably Geraldo, which we talked about. You were at his taping,
yeah,
for that
when
that
the Jamaican guy fell asleep.
So like fucking funny.
I remember seeing that, and I was in comedy at that point. I think I had done it maybe 2 years or whatever it was, but I remember seeing that and being like, I will never be able to do that. I will
do
never
that during a fucking special taping, and like it
incredible.
Just it's unbelievable. I think he probably was the smartest of all time. Like
smartest, quickest. He has that angry, percussive, relentless delivery too, which I like to kind of like emulate at some points. Like, you know, I change speeds and volume and stuff like that. And that was something he was really good at. And just, yeah, everything. Geraldo was fucking incredible, dude. And the presence, right? We're talking about being present and in the moment, and like the ability to go off script during a special, comment on that, and then add a bit that he wasn't planning to tell, which was the Jamaican anecdote, to then bring it full circle to the heckle and close it the fuck out and move on in the exact same order that he was beginning with. It's that is John Nash, beautiful mind, algorithm on a window shit.
It's unbelievable. And
yeah,
to just have the trust to go through that, to like to not have that safety net and just be like, no, I'm going with what's funny. This is happening right now. I mean, and knowing that he was going to find whatever he needed to say in that moment, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Ian Bagg is on par with that too. Like I watched him this weekend, and the fucking dude I started rewatching some of his specials and stuff. Just the trust that you have to have in yourself to like fully commit to that type of act is,
well, because he's like mostly riff, right?
Dude, some of the jokes I think he has ready to go, but it's like he's starting backwards, you know, like he's starting, let's get the crowd and get this rowdy, and then we're gonna plug jokes in. But I've seen Ian Bagg, I don't know, fucking headline 12 times now, just because he comes through quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Every show's different. Like,
wow,
you can watch this dude, and every time you're taking something different away from it. And I'm so impressed by somebody that has the confidence to go up there and be like, you know what, this could go horribly bad, but we're gonna see if we can make it go right. And it's that different mindset. But
It's
Before
awesome.
we
I
take
feel
off,
like, oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just saying, I feel like I'm not saying I'm there. I'm saying right now, I feel like I'm gaining that trust in myself. It takes a long time. Every time that I heard a comedian tell me it takes 10 years or whatever, you want to tell them to shut the fuck up. And it's like, yeah, I'm funny now, like whatever. But then you get to 13 years in and you're like, oh shit, this is like, I'm not Bruce Lee in the sense that I'm not like, there's no thinking about it and it's all instinctual and the technique is ingrained in my DNA, but it is getting there. It's getting there.
Sure.
And with the grind and with the repetition and with that stuff, there are some breakthrough moments where you're like, oh shit, I'm reaching that mastery or just like just the full confidence in the skill that your job takes.
That's why having that camera like that is, and it's just fun to like watch the progress and shit,
Yeah.
It's, it goes back to those like recognizing the wins when they're happening. It's
yeah.
Shit.
I will say this also, having a camera person, dude, is like the best self-esteem boost in the entire world too, because like we're in our own heads with this shit all the time. So we only have ourselves as our soundboards, and we are not an objective party. We're a piece of shit to ourselves, or at least I'm a piece of shit to myself. Having a camera person there and they get to watch the thing develop and what you do on a nightly basis, and they like not necessarily geek out. I'm not hiring a yes man, but they're like pointing out certain things you do differently and roads you took and like the quickness and all this shit. And you're like, oh, that's just something I wouldn't have given myself credit for had somebody else not been here.
Yeah, that's the thing about the live aspect that people watch stand up and they watch this shit on Netflix or whatever, and like the comedians around the world or whatever. Like it's cool that it's helping comedy and like,
is it?
I'm saying that to be like, people have a more of an awareness of stand up than I think ever before.
Totally.
But like I went to shows a lot before I started doing comedy. And then I talked to some people and they're like, no, I didn't ever really watch comedy. I'm like, what the fuck? Like I would be like starting to play basketball and be like, who is LeBron James? Or like, like, why are you wearing that Jumpman logo? Like, it's just, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And my favorite people to do comedy with and be around are people that love comedy. Like it's cut and dry. Like if you don't know who some of these people are, like you should be embarrassed that you don't know, like that's,
there should be a comedy civics test that you take just to be able to get on stage.
For sure.
You should have a baseline in the history of what this is, which is also why like with TikTok and YouTube and all this shit, people are hacking people and they don't even realize it. Like people are doing Patrice on TikTok and they're like, what? Like it's in homage, or it's like, no, you're stealing. You're just saying the same thing that somebody did. And you think like, oh, the difference between white and black people hasn't been done, like men and women. Like you think this is new groundbreaking shit. It's like the lack of awareness of things that have come before us actually stagnates growth.
Oh, for
you know
sure.
what I mean? Because it just makes it cyclical, and you're going and revisiting the same shit over and over again.
It's wild. Well, dude, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got a dad and stuff, but anything you want to plug before we close out?
Yeah, check out the podcast. Here's a scenario. It's fun. It's hypotheticals. It's like, it's hypotheticals, which is a well-written premise, but it's me, Brendan Sagalow, and Mike Feeney, and it's our kind of dynamic that sets the whole thing apart, because basically none of us have real opinions. We just wait for one of us to have to say something, and then we take the opposite the opposite angle and just smash each other relentlessly. It's super fun. We're doing a ton of bonus content on our Patreon. So, if you're into the free podcast and you want more, check out the Patreon. And I have a special up on my YouTube for free, which is called Life Begins, and youtube.com/Mike Cannon Comedy. I have well over 2 hours of stand-up comedy on there. I have a bunch of sketches. I have a web series called Mike Takes Edibles, where I take edibles and then try to compete in a sporting thing. And you could see how that just kind of erodes over time. And, a poker interview series, you name it, I got it up there. Just, check that out.
Fuck yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. And,
I appreciate you having me, man.
thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share this podcast with a friend and rate and subscribe to us. Also, please don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FNF Pod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.